Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Today on the show, we have Kathy Scott Perry. Kathy has been a student and teacher of truth for over 40 years. She went through her own dark night of the soul when within a 3-year period, she went through an incredible amount of personal loss. Through much prayer, meditation, study, and contemplation, Kathy was able to heal and rise from all of this and become an event producer. Over the past 20 years, she has produced events with Marianne Williamson, Neale Donald Walsch, Don Miguel Ruiz, Greg Braden, and many more. She has also co-produced and assisted with several afterlife and near-death experience conferences, including working with, who's near and dear to my heart, the Afterlife Research and Education Institute. She is the producer of the Miracles in the Mountains conference, based on A Course in Miracles and related sequel books recently held in Colorado. The next one will be coming up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, October 11th through 14th, 2019. Kathy counsels people going through catastrophic circumstances, as well as speaks on her experiences to interested groups. She teaches people that they can survive the unimaginable and forgive the unforgivable, and also live a happy and productive life. Her website is miraclepromotions.com. Kathy Scott Perry, my new friend, a warm welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Well, thank you. Wow. That's impressive.
That's you, my friend. Yeah, you never quite realize who you are till you have to send me your bio. And yeah, you sure
Exactly.
have done and continue to do a lot. Well, where are you coming to us from today?
Oh, Houston, which has been my home for many, many years. The reason I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and moved to Houston like 30 years ago. And
That's super. So where do we begin your story? I know you've suffered some incredible loss, but do you want to take us back to way back when I don't even know how to approach the subject because you've dealt with a lot, but I'd rather you share a bit about yourself.
My first loss was my daughter had a baby girl, Dawn, her name was, and I was actually in between jobs. I was taking care of her during the week, and at 3 months old, she died from SIDS. She had infant death syndrome, and that was my first loss. That was actually the first loss our family had. And then about a year later, my former husband, who was my only husband, the father of my 3 children, who we talked to all the time and who was always there for the kids, and he even talked to my mother every week, was always in our lives, all of a sudden just disappeared, just like off the face of the earth. And we found out later that he had been murdered by his best friend for his money. He was a consulting engineer and traveled a lot, and this man took over his financial identity. And this was a lot to be dragged through for the whole family and my kids. And so just as we're trying to recover from that, I got what I call the phone call, which a lot of parents talk about, the phone call. Mm-hmm. I had worked that day, been called in for extra hours, and I was supposed to go to a play with a friend. I got home and my answering machine was blinking, and I was hoping maybe that this friend was calling me to tell me that she didn't feel like going either. Picked up the phone. It was my daughter Nicole saying, "Mom, are you somewhere where there's people around?" And I could hear that she was crying. She was horribly upset. My first thought was she has two adorable little boys, that something had happened to the little boys, something happened to her husband. It never once occurred to me that what she was going to tell me had happened to me and our family, but that she said they had found my youngest daughter, Noelle, dead on the floor of her apartment. And at first, I knew I knew she was depressed. And my first thought was, did she commit suicide? Are they wrong? Could they have been, how could she have been murdered? Because I knew, how depressed she was. So she said, no, Mom, you have to call this number, San Antonio Police Department. So I did. I almost feel like I'm going through it again.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
And you're in such shock that you don't believe it. I thought, well, if I find out what happened, everything's going to be okay. It was more like, well, maybe she got into a mess and maybe they're wrong. Maybe it's a mistake. Your mind will not, you just can't grasp this. You can't, you don't believe it. It's so shocking. It's so quick. You don't understand it. And you think that if you get an explanation, that that's going to change things. So I called the police department. I get homicide, and I identified myself. And I'll never forget this detective saying, Britt, who was the detective on the case, here's your phone call. You see, he'd been waiting for me to call.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth was, and there was no changing it, that my daughter had been actually raped and murdered. So here we are reeling from all these other things. And that was just like, wow. But there was a part of me, because I think that the human nature, the ego, I'm a 40-year Course in Miracles student. So sometimes we expect, we it's like the other shoe. You know how we expect the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
It's like, it was like, well, this is what happens. This is life. Bad things happen in life. And so I just kind of took it in with that, kind of looking at it, that this is the way life is. But this is not the way life should be. But I immediately, first thing I did was tune it out. I remember I was given some tapes, some Carolyn Mice tapes that I hadn't listened to. I had to go into San Antonio. I was living outside in a small town in between San Antonio and Austin. And I put those tapes on the radio and I jammed the circuits. I didn't want to think about it. And then you're in such shock that you think that if you start crying, people thought I was hard. Some people did.
Mm-hmm.
You start crying, you're never going to stop.
Right.
And I've heard other people say that you can be, and you're in shock, you can be really brave because you're just not, assimilating this. It's not reality. It has to come in bits and pieces. So I was just reading, it says the work of mourning is piecemeal. That's what Freud said. So I was just reading this, though reality tells us our loved one is gone, its orders cannot be obeyed at once. So we can't take this whole thing in all at one time.
Right. I'm so sorry for all that you dealt with. And you're right, even though time has passed, just talking about it, those emotions, that love, that's always there.
Yeah.
So you feel it.
Yeah, that's one thing. When it first happened, I have 3 children. So my first thought was a third of my past and a third of my future had just totally was obliterated.
Right.
And after a while, it took a few years, I think, I realized that that wasn't the case. You know, it was an experience in my life. Having my wonderful, beautiful daughter was something that I was a part of my life and always would be. And even now, this was almost 20 years ago. It seems like yesterday, but even now, it's like she's still a part of my life. We talk about her. There's pictures. I have an altar. She's never, and I talk to her in spirit. So she's never really left me.
How did you come to believe that? And I know you say in the introduction that through much prayer, meditation, study, and contemplation, but it seems like obviously grief is a journey.
Yes.
And I'm sure you started off with just unbearable pain and looking for answers and all that. But do you remember anything that came up that made you really think she's still here? As I know she is, and like you and I discussed at the beginning of the call, we think she's here with us right now, helping us along. Yeah.
Sticking stuff in my head, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of my, I have all kinds of suggestions to heal from grief, but one of them is to visit mediums when you can. I have visited many mediums, and because I am an event producer, a spiritual event producer, I know many mediums.
Yes.
Right. So I've been lucky in that way that I've been, and some people you don't even know are mediums will just appear and start telling you. And I had some amazing experiences. I remember it was like less than a year after she died, I went to an Edgar Cayce Institute in conference, and I went to a psychic there, and I wanted to find out about my future, about my work, everything. I had no clue that she was also a medium. And as she's telling me what I think I want to hear, my daughter comes through. And she starts talking to her and saying, "Mom, I'm all right." And she told her, she said, it's beautiful over here. The grass is so green and the sky is so blue. And then the medium said she was with a little girl. Now, I did not tell this medium anything. I was looking for other information. And she said she's with a little girl, and she had the little girl that died of crib death, and a black dog with curly hair, a little black dog with curly hair. Well, right there to me was a red flag, because I did not remember any little black dog with curly hair. So right away I thought, that, it's not true. I wouldn't want to say she's a fraud, but, she doesn't know. This is not.
It wasn't good enough.
Exactly. It's, she's making this up. So I went back and told my daughter about it, my other daughter. And she said, because they had a big white Samoyed dog, which is totally obviously the opposite of a little black curly haired dog.
Right.
And I told my daughter, and she said, "Mom, don't you remember that little dog that you had, that Noel brought home right before the baby died? This little dog was with the baby the whole time." And I had it was like completely out of my memory.
Oh.
And yes, and we had to put the dog to sleep. So there you are. Something that wasn't even in my consciousness.
Right.
She brought up and she saw and she told me about.
That is reassuring, number one, that the afterlife is real, but that our animals are there, and especially comforting your
Yes,
grandchild, your daughter.
yes, yes. And then she talked too about the funeral was or the memorial service. We quickly got it together. And I was in near Austin, Texas. We came up to Houston and then to a church that I used to go to, and they didn't have any music. So the minister had a tape. That's when we had tapes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the You'll Never Walk Alone. She said, well, I have this. Now, most memorial services, you usually don't play this song. So she put it on, and it was really beautiful. And also, they asked me, and at that time, I didn't have a lot of money. I was just working, living on a paycheck. And relatives and friends that said, do you want money or do you want flowers? I wanted flowers for her because she had not had many flowers in her life. So she said, through a medium, she said, the service was so beautiful, and that song almost made me cry. And I loved the yellow flowers. Well, there was beautiful yellow flowers. I said yellow was her favorite color. You see, she was there,
Yes.
saw it all.
Very special.
And so from time to time and through the years, I have actually talked to her, and there's one thing that of great interest that she said. She said she wanted to die, which I knew she was depressed. And then she laughed and she said, be careful. You get what you ask for.
Mm-hmm.
Very profound.
Very profound.
And she has wanted me to write about her. And I'm a writer, but I've got so many other things on my plate that I've never really sat down and even thought about it. She said she would help me. And I had there was a group reading, and this woman said, you're writing about her, right? And I'm going, no. That was the first thing she said. I said, she wants me to write about her. But it was so funny. That was the very first thing that came out of her mouth. And then I went to another one. Now, this is over a span of 20 years, and not like I spent every minute going to.
That's okay.
But there was in Minneapolis, Psychics in the City. They have these group, where you can ask questions and group readings, and there's 3 of them. And I couldn't think of a question, and all of a sudden I realized it was Noelle's birthday. And I didn't even think of that when I walked in. So my thought was, well, maybe she has a message for me. Mm-hmm. So I asked that, and one woman said, well, didn't you and Noelle have a dream? And I'm thinking, what would that be? Well, that's her book. That's that's our dream.
Oh.
And, she said she would help me. And this is the thing. I know. And she says things like she watches me. Mm-hmm. She's always there. I'm a little fearful. As much as I know about the other side, I'm a little fearful. If somebody appeared to me in the middle of the night, I'm not sure what I would do.
Well, I agree with you on that. And I believe, but if all of a sudden somebody manifested in front of me, I don't know if I could handle that. So I'm happy with how I have my understanding. And maybe in time, a little bit at a time, but I agree with what you're saying. Oh, but it sounds like she's very much with you, and love never dies. never. And,
No,
she'll be the right there to meet you when, your special time comes as well.
I know. Yeah. And you don't have to forget them,
No,
but no. And you don't have to not think about them, but you have to go on with your life.
right.
And they want that. This is when this first happens, everyone's had this experience where you don't want to have fun because you know they can't have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so you feel guilty about doing things, but they want you to go on with your life. And I did a lot of stuff besides jamming the circuits, which is probably not the best thing to do. And some of the bad things I did was it was wintertime. It was December 13th, which would really ruin your Christmas. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I sat home, I contemplated, I prayed, I read books, which is good, but again, jamming the mind.
Right.
I drank wine, which I don't do anymore. I ate popcorn and pretzels, comfort foods.
Mm-hmm.
This is not really in the long run good for you at all. But it was what I had, the only way I could cope with it. It was better than taking drugs. But another thing I would strongly suggest is don't be really careful how you act and also, or the things that you do. Also, don't make any decisions. You don't make any quick decisions until your mind is right, because I gave away all of her things and I couldn't handle looking at them. And then later I was wishing I'd kept some things just as a memento.
Yes.
You know how you need to give yourself a lot of time before you can make wise decisions. Then what I did a lot, and I worked with essential oils. I took a lot of essential oil baths, and that led me to I was actually a distributor, and I traveled all over the world studying. I went to France, and I started giving workshops on how to use them. Well, this gave me something to do. This gave me something to take my mind off the pain and all the losses.
Mm-hmm.
So I strongly suggest to everyone, if they're, don't just crater, or, many people say they don't want to go out. They don't want to meet people. They want to stay in bed in the fetal position, and don't do that, because also life is out there waiting for you, and there's all kinds of interesting things that can and will happen to you after you've had a catastrophic experience.
It's so true. I've been reading a book or listening to a book on audio called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And it's a Dale Carnegie book from the whenever 40s. I'm not even sure. But
Yeah.
there's so many examples of people who were grief stricken, and the remedy, I don't want to say remedy because that's not it, but you say jamming the circuits. He and all these people, with the only way they could get through it was to keep busy, keep their eye on something else. And even though we're prone to just want to be alone and in that fetal position, by actually, being with other people and doing things, or even setting your sights on helping someone else or working, whatever, that it is a very therapeutic way through. So I wouldn't make yourself wrong for any of those things. And if all you have is popcorn around, and that's, you're going to deal with it. I mean, we deal with it the best we can. I had chocolate, right? And,
Yeah.
we deal with it the
I
best we
added
can.
wine to the popcorn.
Yeah, I think I had the wine too. But how did you end up moving into the conference planning and producer? I think, when I was thinking about all the people that you've worked with, I thought, well, how in the world did that happen? Because first of all, how did that happen? And then obviously you're around people that speak on the soul level. I can't even imagine how much that has empowered you.
Yeah, that was a lot of my reading, a lot of the books, and I went to a lot of conferences and to learn and to why did this happen? Why did these three things happen? And why do they happen to one person or one family? Or so looking for answers, I spent a lot of time, and I actually helped found a unity church in the small town I was living in, and I became the event producer. And I started looking into, I just, by volunteering first, or by going to the conferences and workshops first, and then volunteering, and then I started out small, and then it just like the Holy Spirit or whatever, the higher power brought all these people to me, and it just happened. It just happened. So many times I would just think that I would like to produce a certain person, and their agent would show up. Or, there's so much more to this. For instance, I was joking around. I just produced Don Miguel Ruiz at our really small church, which is amazing to do this. In the place, it's beautiful but small. And someone said, "Well, who's next?" And I said, "Oh, Neale Donald Walsch." And I was joking. I didn't know him. It just popped in my head. And 2 weeks later, his agent called me.
Be careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
That is something else.
Exactly. I had a friend say, "Well, it's a good thing you didn't say, 'Oh, Jesus Christ.'"
Well, there he would be, yes. But I tell you, I've heard it said before, our word creates our world. And I don't think we give enough credit to not only the words that come out of our mouth, but the actions we take, the feelings we have. And I do buy into this whole energetic realm, obviously, believing in the afterlife, but these things together, you can move mountains, and you can have Neale Donald Walsch's agent call you. And these things are real. This is real.
Honestly, it is. It's also, it's like if it's really meant to be, the path will be clear. It will be easy. You can do it.
And who would have ever thought in your deepest, darkest moments that this is what you would have created? And I don't know if our listeners know who Marianne Williamson, Neale Donald Walsch, Don Miguel Ruiz, Greg Braden, and so many more are, but they're heavy-duty thought leaders, big players in the world that have contributed and have these books that have been read by millions. They're the big time, the big league. Speaking of baseball. Yeah. And the fact, and I don't know, let me back up. I know for myself, Kathy, looking back on my life, I needed to have my father's death happen as it did, and other factors that cracked my heart wide open and left me in an extreme amount of pain. But that had to happen for me to begin my journey, and I wouldn't be where I am right now talking to you if those events didn't occur. Do you think that all those horrific events that happened in your life led to you being where you are today?
Oh, yes, definitely. I would have never, I don't think that I would never done any of these things. Just everything was just put in place. It was just perfect timing. And I had another experience, I don't know if it's, but I'm going to share it. I lost my job because I was gone so much because of the murders actually they relegated it to part-time and put another person in. Mm-hmm. So I lost a lot of money. I had really no income. So my credit got bad. I know this sounds weird, but I'm
with you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm going to share where I'm going with this. Um, and my mother and I joined Parents of Murdered Children, which was a good group. That's another thing I want to share too is get in some groups, get in with other people who have experienced the same thing, because that is so helpful. And we lobbied at the legislature for various things. Well, in that certain year, credit scoring was big, and my car insurance went up from like $300 or $400 a year to about $1,300, which was a lot considering. Yeah, and it was a long time ago, and considering that I had very limited income. So I had a Monday afternoon off. They were talking about this at the state legislature. I had a story. So I went up there and I testified. Well, people went crazy. I mean, I made the headlines, the front page of the Austin American Statesman. People were calling all over wanting me to interview me. And I ended up one day, the woman who I was working through a consumers activist group called Texas Watch, who are looking out for consumers at the Texas state legislature. She called, she goes, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "What do I need to?" She goes, "Well, CBS Evening News with Dan Rather wants to do a segment on you." So they came out to my small town, came all the way out to Wimberley, Texas. Bill Whitaker, who is one of their journalists.
Yes.
Online journalist, Bill, yeah. He and his producer came out and they interviewed me, and there was a 5-minute segment on CBS Evening News with Dan Rather on my experience with credit scoring.
That's great.
And it was actually very good. I was surprised. And, I was thinking I was going to look like a victim, but I didn't. I looked more like a victor. And, but, and then I had people calling to me from all over the United States, like the Wall Street Journal. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that you don't know where this is going to take you. If you're lying in bed in a fetal position, none of this is ever going to happen.
That's true.
And the other thing is this is what I teach in my spiritual classes, is that I didn't expect it. It just, you can't buy that kind of promotion and advertising with $1 million. But it just happened. And again, it happened because of what happened, because I was proactive. I took it and ran with it and did something with it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the GPSs. I forgot who was. Do you know Mike Dooley, who he is? Yeah, he's great. But I heard him speak, and he was talking about if you want to create this great relationship, and you create this person, and you visualize, and then you just sit there waiting. That person can't show up. You have to be out in the world. It may or may not be the pizza man. And he'd say, even when you program the GPS where you want to go, you can't just sit in the car. You have to start driving. And so, yes, it's great to have intention and all that stuff. But I think the miracles can occur when we're in action, because you just never know who may show up on the scene and who you meet through another person or being involved. So this is good demonstrations of miracles that happen when you're on the court as opposed to in the sidelines.
Exactly. And you have to, you can focus on what you want and set your intentions, but you don't tell God or the universe or how to do it. But you get up and you start walking. And then all help will come. It's happened to me time and time again. That's what happens to me with the conferences. All of a sudden I'll get an idea. I'll start working on it. all kinds of people will show up, all kinds of help, just what I need. I'll start thinking I need a graphics person, or I need someone to work on my website, and that person will just show up. I know it sounds crazy and it sounds too easy, but the truth of the matter is that it's happened over and over and over again.
But the key denominator is you're in action, following your ideas, doing something, not waiting.
And your faith, and your belief that you're going to be able to do it. When I produced Marianne Williamson, I had no idea. I connected. Well, it was again my activism. Right after all the state legislature was, even one of the candidates asked me to campaign with them. And I wasn't in politics at all. I didn't even know about, the Democrats or the Republicans or anything. But and then I thought, well, I've had a lot of experience. After the election was, or that state legislative session was over, what am I going to do with it? And all of a sudden, there's an email from Marianne Williamson saying that she wants activists in Washington, D.C. to start a Department of Peace. So I thought, well, that's something I can do. Kind of a big to take out. So I went to her conference in Washington, D.C., and I connected with her. Of course, she's from Houston, so we had a lot in common. And I asked her if she'd come and help start our new church that we had just started. And she said, sure, just contact me. Well, if I'd known all her requirements before I did this, I would have never done it. I mean, right. She needs a lot. She's a famous person.
Yes.
But she was willing to come at much less than what she normally does, because she wanted to help us out. And it was basically miraculous. So if you don't start thinking you can't do something, because you can, as long as you get all the negatives out of the way.
Yeah, there's a book written by, I think, Walter Russell that's called God Will Work With You, but Not For You. And it is all about you being on the court, taking action, and you get this invisible help along the way.
Exactly. And the other thing that I didn't talk about before was when I was talking about kind of regressing back here, jamming the circuits, and you really need to get this grief out. And what I did, which was most helpful, was to join a group in my small town. It was a parents who had lost children in various ways, and we talked every week. It was at a local church. It was wonderful, and we connected every week. We heard these stories of these different people who are losing their child, and you had something in common with these people. Everyone got out. They told every single detail. Like one child his car was hit by a train. And these are the kinds of things that you can't talk about publicly.
Right.
And people are also, they're afraid to bring it up to you. They think you don't want to talk about it. Most people that I know do. This is how you heal, by talking about it. And I remember one story how there was a lady there that her son had died like 20 years before that of AIDS, but she was there to support. She was an older lady. And I was sitting there looking at her, and I was thinking, wow, that must be horrible to know that your child is going to die for such a long time. At least with murder, it's quick. You're not sitting there mourning and gradually losing a child.
Right.
So we were walking out, and she walks up to me and she takes my hand. Now, we hadn't had any verbal communication at all. And she said, "My heart goes out to you." She said, "I can't imagine what you've gone through." She says, "I can see a child dying of an illness, but murder?" She goes, now here, I was feeling bad for her years of knowing her child was going to die, and she felt bad for me.
Oh, I tell you, people need people, and you producing so many conferences, you know what it's like to have a group together of like-minded people. Even myself, people probably don't believe this, but I have gone to 99% of my conferences by myself, not knowing a single person, being scared to death. Will I fit in? What am I doing here? Will there be anybody to talk to? And in a matter of just minutes, once I get into a conference room, it's like I feel like I found my people. And then you have these lifelong relationships with people. And, you being behind the scenes as the producer of the events, you really provide the foundation for just people's spirituality and friendships and connections and healing, all that stuff to grow, to flourish.
Yeah.
So thank you for being in front of the scenes, behind the scenes, all over the place in action to make these things happen. And especially even sharing right now. You continue to give. You're a special woman, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Well, the Afterlife Conference is a place where people when I was there last year, I just talked to so many people. They're looking for answers. Mm-hmm. They want to know what happened to their loved one. And this is where they're going to get it. And also, like you say, in a group of people, talking it out, finding people who share the same experience.
That's right.
That is the most healing. That is so healing. You're not there. You don't have to sit and, your life isn't going to change by listening to a lecture. I mean, you're going, it's this kind of conference is amazing because the things that people tell you are incredibly interesting and very, enlightening. But your best experience is meeting other people and sharing with them, because then you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. It's so important. So important. I wanted to ask you, by nature of you producing and attending so many conferences, have you gotten more evidence for yourself of the reality of the afterlife through different things you've heard and witnessed and seen? Because I know you've done near-death experience work conference.
Yes, I did one in March in Austin. I was a assistant. I didn't produce it by myself, but I was called in to help out. Yes, there was several things that, as much as I've talked to my daughter, and it's still question, what is going to happen to us? What's going to happen when we die? And
right.
Are we just going to be stuck in the ground or in some pot somewhere?
Yes.
So one of the things I've learned, and I just recently really got this, is that consciousness never dies. When you interviewed one of my speakers, or actually he was the producer, and he was trying to get out of a pipe in the river, and when he said he never lost consciousness, he was still fighting to try to get out of the pipe, and all of a sudden he's being escorted by a couple of angels out of this window thing that was appearing. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing? I'm trying to get out of here." He had no idea that he had actually died. And of course, you hear this story over and over again, but I personally know this person. So I started listening to stories about how they say you don't even know you're dying, and you're just, so also out of body experiences, people being operated on, and they're looking at their bodies.
Right.
They're overhead, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I just heard a story about that and I just snapped. I thought, you know what? Like when you go to bed, you dream. Your consciousness never ever dies, so it never stops. That's very comforting to me because I can't imagine. I'm imagining, what will I be doing? Running around, sitting on a cloud and hanging with angels? What do you do?
Right.
And oh, that's another. My mother, when she passed away, she like a couple days before, she said, "What are all these people doing in here?" She was seeing people, and then also she said, "Who's this little girl running around here?" And that was probably
Oh,
her great granddaughter
yes.
that died. But I think the consciousness thing really stands out to me.
Yeah. And it's hard to understand it, to fathom it. And I don't think it's our job to figure it out, but just, to trust. We were talking before we started about our cell phones. Like, I have no idea how it works, but it does. So I don't have to understand the world of consciousness and energy and where our loved ones are and how these people show up while you're taking action and all that. Like, we don't need to know even how gravity works, but to know that it's real.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
Mm.
It's had an or they're saying like oh, I was thinking more of like our consciousness or God or whatever you
Hmm.
want to call it. It's like the sun, it's always there. And we're doing all this stuff underneath it. But this is our lives are, um, this is in the background. Like we have an operating system in the back of us
Hmm.
that we don't know about,
Hmm.
just like the phone does.
Right. And the sun's a perfect example. I was out for a walk and the big clouds came and it started to rain and it was dark, but it doesn't mean the sun's not there, and those times that are tough for us, it doesn't mean we call it God, the universe, whatever that is for you, but it's still there.
Yes, it's all. I've learned a lot from this is not to crater when a lot of times people will. Everything's relative, I mean, even a death of your animal, a loss of a job, it's all relative. It's all grief, and you can crater, like I say, or you can get under the covers, or you
Hmm.
can actively change that. But at the same time, things are always going to happen. I mean, you're going to go everybody goes through relatively calm, and then, there's something going on with the neighbors or something going on with your whatever, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to deal with. I don't crater with those anymore. I just know that I'm going to take care of it and then I'm going to go on and it's always going to get better. So if you're really grieving, if you're really hurt and pain, it's not going to last. This is why people when they commit suicide, if they just hang in a little bit, they will heal. Good things can happen to you. I've had
Yeah.
amazing amount of things happen to me since my daughter and, since the deaths. I would have never thought that.
No, especially going through it. But looking back, you can see the growth, you can see the opportunities, you can see the difference you've made in other lives. Um, yeah, I remember hearing the story Mothers Against Drunk Drivers had. Obviously, they've impacted millions of people with all their information. But, how did it start with, mothers losing their children to drunk driving?
Exactly. Exactly. And I've seen so many people take their tragedies and turn them around.
Hmm.
the little kids that were all killed in
Sandy Hook.
yeah, they're doing a lot amazing things.
Sure they are. Yeah.
And the kids in Florida, I'm just so impressed.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking over, and that to me, they're kids after my own heart. I was an activist. I did things, and I am motivated by failure. So I don't want to be I don't want to have failed to be motivated.
Right.
But
let me ask you, Kathy, you had said in the introduction here that you counsel people going through catastrophic circumstances. Can people reach out to you and work with you?
Sure, they can. I'm not a doctor, obviously.
No,
so
but you're a caring human being who's been there.
yes, and I'm somebody to talk to. You see, what I was sharing before, as was that when I was in that group where we were able to talk everything out, the minister went on a sabbatical, so we had a 3-month where we didn't do this anymore. We were there about a year and a half talking about everything, and just the loving sharing. When she came back, nobody came back to the group. Basically because we were healed,
Yes.
Which I think is miraculous. So just talking about it, yes, they can call me. I do it like on a love offering basis. I mean, I'm willing to talk if you don't have any, I can't, my time is rather valuable. So, but what I can do is you can talk to me and I can share and I can see. I'm an observer that can see things that you can't.
That's a gift, because I know when we're in our own shoes, sometimes we just can't see any light through the forest, whatever that expression is.
Yes.
How would people get in touch with you? Through your website, Miracle Promotions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do that. My contact information is on there. But I think important too that the Miracles in the Mountains conference is going to be about love and forgiveness, and I'm going to be talking about forgiving the unforgivable.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have a speaker who's going to do the keynote. His name is Scott Stabile. I don't know if anybody's heard about him, but he has written a book called Big Love. His parents were both killed during a robbery at their store when he was 14 years old. So he has quite a story, and his mission is to love the heck out of the world. And he's an amazing person. So it's all going to be about limitless love and true forgiveness. Mm. Again, Scott and I will be talking, both not together, but we'll both be talking about forgiving the unforgivable. And then we'll have some Course in Miracles students, teachers, which, not everyone's going to know these names, but it's going to be just a fabulous event. It's October 11th through the 14th. It's over Columbus Day weekend, 2019, a year from now. But you have to get these things going, and time goes fast. So I just go to Miracles Promotions. I've got the conference. I'm going to have some other things going on. And, of course, you're welcome to call me for counseling.
Perfect. That's in Santa Fe. And I tell you, the year will go by fast. It was just last year that I spoke for the first time at the Afterlife Symposium. And now it's 3 weeks or less than 3 weeks away. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the 2018 one. So, and if people are interested in that, that is September 14th through 16th, 2018, Scottsdale, Arizona. You go to afterlifesymposium.org to find out more. But you meet your posse, your group, your people, And
It,
yeah, you feel like I know my own personal journeys through grief and felt very much alone. And you are so right, Kathy. It makes a difference to talk to others who are there where you are, or a few steps ahead or a few steps behind, to be part of a group. And we cannot, and I don't think we were meant to go through this life alone. You know,
no.
people need people.
Yes. And don't hesitate. Don't, because there's a lot of people there I met last year that were by themselves. They had come from all over, that, were meeting people. Just if you need to go, and you will get a lot of answers. There's some amazing stuff going on that you would never think is happening. There's one woman, Sonya,
Rinaldi, yes.
and then there's oh gosh, the woman who's getting people's voices on the computer.
Yeah, Sherry Pearl, Dr.
Sherry.
Sherry Pearl. Sonya Rinaldi's getting videos of people in the afterlife. It's mind-boggling. And when you are there, or even I have interviewed so many of the people that are speaking at this event, but to hear these stories, you can't really fight this argument that the afterlife isn't real, because it's like, well, then how about this? 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 And it's like, okay.
Well, Sonya had people in the audience whose people were appearing,
Yes.
that were on her screen, mothers who'd lost children, and
Yes.
the mother standing up and saying, "Yes, that's my child."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
it's great.
And another perk. I keep saying, calling it a perk, but I met Kathleen Malone way before this conference. That's why I was there. She's the executive producer, and I would not have never met her if all these things hadn't happened either. We just happened to meet and connect, find out we're from the same hometown, we're our birthdays are almost the same, our names are almost the same, we do the same job, and we just happened to meet through me being active.
Yeah.
And producing events.
Wow. That's so great. Thank you. Oh, and I just remembered, we've now, the AREI has decided to live stream several of the speakers. So although I don't have the link this second, if you are listening to this episode on YouTube or iTunes, and if you click in the description, by the time you're listening to it, I will have the link. So if you cannot physically attend the symposium, you can attend by nature of your computer, and they will be, not all the speakers, but some will be recorded, and you can watch either live or at a future date, which I think is amazing, the whole world of technology, so that we're going to start having more and more of these conferences virtually, so that we can still meet and get together, but you might be looking at somebody's face on the computer, because there's no reason we can't build these communities in cyber world. We're all real people with the same interests. So I'm excited.
Yes, and I've these people who are streaming, you've got a live chat box. People communicate there, so
Yes.
You're interacting with people all the time.
Yeah,
just
beautiful.
Like not quite as good as being there, but almost.
Almost. If you don't have another option, that's your way. Kathy, Is there anything else you want to share, or any questions I didn't answer that I ask you that I should have? And yeah, we're just going to wrap up the episode. But any final thoughts or words?
Just that, yes, your life is not over when these things happen. Life comes around again. It's waiting for you. And yes, grieve. Take time to grieve. Don't let anybody tell you not to grieve. And don't, talk about your experience. Talk about your loved one. But just know that there is life after grief. And you can forgive. I think the biggest thing, too, which we didn't talk much about, is forgiving, which means releasing, letting go. Now, I don't know who the perpetrator is in my daughter's case, but I do in my ex-husband's. I had to let him go. I had to forgive him. That doesn't mean it's okay that you murdered my best friend here, but it's for you. Release it. This is one thing that a lot of people do. They hold it and they have grievances and they let that go because it's not doing you any service whatsoever. And your loved one doesn't want you to hang on to it.
That's true.
Forgive. Again, you can live a wonderful life, but you can always bring that person with you in your heart. You don't have to leave them and let them go in order to go on with your life.
Mm-hmm. And include them. You still talk to your daughter.
Yeah.
Noelle, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. I haven't talked to her. I do talk to her, but I still work through mediums because I'm afraid. I have to just be honest. You see, we're all probably afraid. That's why there's a veil there. If we could all just release that, we'd probably lift that veil. But it's like she's always with me. Her memory, that child I had, it's never going to erase. Death is never going to erase that.
No. Nope. And then that moment you take your last breath, she'll be right there watching you cross that finish line, cheering you on. That with a little black dog that you don't remember with the curly hair.
Yeah.
And your grandchild. And you'll be looking down at your grandson playing in the big leagues, playing baseball, however that all happens. If we only could if we could only take a moment and look from their eyes, looking back down on us, I think we could live a different kind of life of really trusting. And that's why I know you've produced the conferences you have, and I try to share as much as I can. And we're still human, we still go through pain, but having this belief is so much different than just having the fear of the unknown and I don't know, I guess faith is the word I'm looking for. Having the faith that this is all real. You can breathe and you can live and be in action.
Exactly. And if you retreat and, get under the covers in the fetal position, you're going to miss out on a lot.
Yes. And it takes something, because I do believe there is time for that position and we just can't help it. But then, like we wake up in the morning after a night's rest and the sun comes up, sometimes we got to push ourselves to put our sneakers on to go outside for a walk, but it makes a difference. And you never know who you're going to bump into and what kind of miracles can follow. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you. You're doing wonderful work yourself.
Loved it. And we'll meet up again soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
And for our listener, thank you for being with Kathy and I. Just a reminder, her website is miraclepromotions.com. And then I do have a link to that and some others in the description of this episode. So I invite you to scroll down and check that out. And once again, our Afterlife Symposium's coming up September 14th through 16th, 2018. And you may be listening to this a year ahead, but still go visit afterlifesymposium.org to find out more about whatever's happening this current year and just who some of the people are doing some amazing things with technology and grief and afterlife communications. So it really is truly amazing. The home base for this show is WeDon'tDieRadio.com, and I've got a bunch of free healing gifts for you there. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I'm so grateful that we've got to spend this hour with Kathy Scott Perry. I'm so grateful I get to have these conversations because this for me is being in action. I can wake up on the wrong side of the bed a lot. But having one of these conversations with a fantastic guest like Kathy reminds me of who I am, what my life is for. And so I love that. I'm really taking from this, remembering to be in action. So I do believe with all my heart that life is an education for the soul, no matter how difficult it is. There's always growth that can occur You, my friend, your life is important. You are important. You have no idea the impact you have on other people. So even just giving a smile will make a difference. So I really want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.